They smiled when they said it. That's what stung the most. Not the words, not even the decision, just the way they smiled as if they were doing me a favor. I remember sitting in that cold leather chair in the Hawthorne boardroom. The walls were lined with my father's legacy portraits of men who built industries and empires. Men with steel eyes and silver hair, men like my father. Men, not women, not me. He cleared his throat and folded his hands like he always did when delivering final judgments. Camilla, he began, voice thick with patronizing calm. We've decided to move forward with restructuring. Effective immediately. The board will be consolidating responsibilities among the senior partners. I looked around the table. My cousin Grant wouldn't meet my eyes. Neither would Uncle Martin. Only Gregory, my brother, smirked like the smug little prince he always was. What does that mean? Exactly, I asked, though I already knew. It was Grant who said it. You'll no longer have voting rights in the advisory branch. Your shares will be held in trust. Held in trust. Like I was some fragile little girl who didn't know where to put her toys. But I'm still on the board, I started, trying to breathe. My father shook his head gently, like a priest denying absolution. You've had your chance, Camilla. You chose tech startups. You chose the West Coast. You walked away from this family. I didn't walk away. I just tried to find my own path, but they never cared to see the difference. Gregory leaned back in his chair and delivered the final cut. Let's be honest. You're not exactly qualified for this kind of business. And there it was. The sentence that turned my blood to fire. You're not qualified. Not qualified, even though I graduated top of my class at Columbia. Not qualified, despite the financial modeling app I built that raised $10 million in seed funding in just 8 months. Not qualified because I didn't wear their suits. Because I didn't stay in New York. Because I didn't ask for permission. I stared at my father. His eyes didn't flinch. Not even a flicker. I see, I said quietly. That's all. Just those 2 words. I gathered my notebook, my pen, and my pride. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I stood up, buttoned my coat, and walked out of the room like it didn't matter. But it did. God, it did! Back in the elevator, I pressed the button to the lobby and stared at my reflection in the mirror paneling. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She looked defeated. That terrified me more than anything, because I was not defeated. Not yet. Outside, the wind bit at my cheeks, and the streets buzzed with the apathy of New York's wealthy. No one saw me as I walked away from Hawthorne Tower. No one noticed the girl who had just been disinherited in a boardroom lined with power and pedigree. But I saw me, and I promised her right there, right then, that I would come back, not as a partner, not as a daughter, as the one they would have to answer to. The first few weeks were numb. I didn't speak to anyone. I let the calls from my mother go unanswered. She'd probably heard about the vote by now. I imagined her voice. Just let it go. Camilla, this is how the world works. No, Mother, this is how your world works. Mine's just getting started. I spent my days in the corner of a coffee shop downtown, sketching out models, plans, and pitches. The same fire that had driven me to create FinMatch, a financial literacy platform that helped underserved women learn to invest, was now laser-focused on something new, something bigger. They wanted to cut me off, fine. I'd build something so sharp it would cut them back. It started small. I reached out to Bianca Chen, my former CTO and one of the smartest women I knew. Then came Malik, a soft-spoken data scientist who had once turned an insurance firm's back-end into a prediction machine. We formed a team quiet, fast, and hungry. I didn't tell them why I was building what I was building. Not yet. We called it Link, an intelligent business operations AI that could learn, adapt, and recommend real-time strategic moves across departments. While Hawthorne was still hiring 6 consultants to write reports no one read, Link could outthink them in seconds. We bootstrapped with my remaining capital. And when I say we bled for it, I mean it. There were nights I slept on the office floor. Nights I thought maybe, just maybe, they were right. Maybe I wasn't qualified. But then I'd remember Gregory's face. That smirk, that smug, entitled grin. And suddenly, I had the energy of 1,000 storms. 6 months in, we had a prototype. It was clunky, but it worked. Our first test client, an auto parts distributor in Ohio, cut costs by 23% in 2 quarters. Then a second client came, then a third. Word got out, but I still kept my name off everything. I was just M. Hawthorne, founder. No press, no panels, no interviews. I didn't want fame, I wanted leverage. The last scene in this chapter was me sitting alone on a rooftop, watching the lights of Manhattan flicker like dying stars. I held the original memo, the one they signed to remove me from the board. Still crisp, still smug. I folded it once, then again, slipped it into the flames of a rooftop fireplace, and whispered, "You said I wasn't qualified." The paper curled and blackened, and I smiled for the first time in weeks. Let's see how qualified you are when I own the building. They thought I'd vanish, that I'd crawl back to California, to my little startup world, to my sandbox. That's what Uncle Martin once called it, a playground for tech dreamers who don't understand real business. But I didn't fade. I didn't flee. I folded into silence because silence is the most underestimated form of power. The first thing I did was disappear from their radar. I closed my Manhattan apartment, moved into a brownstone no one knew I owned, bought it under a trust when I was 27. No doorman, no building gossip, just space to think. Then I wiped my social presence, deleted LinkedIn, archived my Medium articles, changed the name on my business email to The World. Camilla Hawthorne had gone quiet, but behind the curtain I was building. Not just software, not just strategy, something more dangerous, momentum. Bianca and Malik kept asking why I wouldn't take any media offers. We were growing fast. Link had landed a deal with a mid-tier logistics firm that doubled their margins within 4 months. Investors were circling like hawks. Every week, some venture capital firm offered to inject cash in exchange for my face. But I told them all the same thing. My face doesn't close deals. My results do. I wasn't building a brand, I was building a weapon. I knew how the family operated. The Hawthorns were addicted to pedigree, power, perception. They only respected what they couldn't control, so I made sure to keep myself untraceable until I could walk in as someone they didn't recognize, and that meant patience. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It simmers. It's the kind of pain that visits you at 3 a.m. when the office is dark, and your code breaks, and your bank account blinks in warning red, when you wonder if maybe, just maybe, they were right. But then I'd remember that boardroom, that smirk on Gregory's face, and I'd whisper to myself, this isn't about proving them wrong. This is about becoming undeniable. One night, Bianca brought me a bottle of whiskey. "You okay?" she asked softly. I looked up from the war board I'd built lines of interconnected companies, old vendors, shadow trusts, and subsidiaries connected to Hawthorne Industries like veins. I pointed to a small firm at the bottom, Harrison and Gold. They're a dying supply chain company. Hawthorne's trying to offload them. Bianca blinked. So I grinned. We're going to buy it. And we did, through a dummy corp in Singapore. And when we took over Harrison and Gold, we didn't announce it. We just cleaned house, upgraded their systems using Link, tripled their efficiency in 8 months. The firm that the Hawthorns had called dead weight became one of the most profitable arms in their chain. And they didn't even know I was behind it. That was just the beginning. I targeted companies they overlooked, ones they undervalued, ones buried in the footnotes of their annual reports. Each acquisition moved quietly, each improvement, another domino. By year's end, I owned stakes in 7 companies that fed directly into Hawthorne Industries' supply ecosystem. Indirectly. Of course, on paper, I was no one. In reality, I was tightening a leash around their throat. I kept a folder, digital and physical, titled Collapse Blueprint, inside it documents, patterns, old deals, non-competes they violated, shell companies they forgot to disclose. A whisper trail of executive misconduct that could burn the board from the inside out. But I wasn't ready to use it. Not yet. I wasn't here to burn the empire. I was here to inherit it. By the 18-month mark, Link had become the most adopted adaptive operations AI in the Eastern Corridor. We were in stealth mode. No interviews, no features, no noise, just impact. I let the numbers speak. 230% client retention rate, 6.3x average ROI within a fiscal year, 91% C-level renewal conversion. And still, no one in my family connected the dots, because they never bothered to look beneath the surface. They never believed someone like me, someone they discarded, could become a threat. One evening, I was at a private equity mixer in Tribeca. I wore a tailored black blazer, no jewelry, hair pulled back, understated. A man approached me tall, clean-shaven. I knew him. Marcus Leland, former Hawthorne strategist. Now with the rival firm that once tried to court Gregory. He smiled. "You're with Link, right? Impressive work you're doing." I raised an eyebrow. "You've heard of us." He chuckled. "Everyone has. They just don't know who's behind it." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Between us? Some of the Hawthorne board is worried." My heart didn't skip. My breath didn't falter. I just sipped my drink and replied, "Good. They should be." That night, I walked home alone. It was raining, but I didn't pull out an umbrella. I wanted to feel it. Every drop, every reminder that I was alive, awake, evolving. They thought I'd disappear. They thought I'd fold. But I was never just a girl with ambition. I was the quiet storm they forgot to track. As I stood beneath the city lights, drenched and smiling, I whispered the promise again. Not to the sky, not to my father, not even to Gregory, to myself. I'm not coming back to beg, I'm coming back to buy. They were too comfortable to notice. That's what makes the powerful so fragile. They feast on legacy. They inherit offices, not lessons. And when the tides change, they're always the last to realize they're drowning. The Hawthorns were no different. While they clinked glasses in boardrooms and raised toasts at galas, I was beneath the floorboards remapping the architecture of everything they believed they owned. It began with numbers. I had studied Hawthorne Industries the way surgeons study anatomy, not the skin, the systems beneath, the arteries, the blind spots. There was a key insight in their last quarterly report, buried in footnote 42C. A supply firm in Georgia, once critical to their logistics line, had been deemed non-core. Translation: they were going to sell it off. I smiled, because I'd already bought it, 2 weeks earlier. I moved like a ghost through the underbelly of their empire. Never directly. Every acquisition went through a shell entity, then 2 more, until even the SEC would need months to trace me. One by one. I purchased the companies that Hawthorne Industries had either discarded, neglected, or underestimated. An old packaging plant in Ohio, a dormant energy analytics startup in Austin, a patent-heavy logistics firm that had gone bankrupt after COVID. I revived them. Quietly, efficiently, and I did something my family never learned how to do. I listened. To the floor managers, to the developers, to the janitors. They told me where the rot was, and I cut it out, inch by inch. Within 18 months, I controlled 17% of Hawthorne Industries' operational web through silent nodes and equity networks they thought were unconnected. It wasn't just power, it was leverage. And with leverage, you don't knock, you break the lock, step inside, and sit in their chair before they know the room's been taken. Bianca called it surgical revenge. Malik called it capitalist chess. But to me, it was reclamation. They took my name off the board, so I carved my initials into the base. The true breakthrough came through a man named Elijah Shaw. He was the former CFO of Darrow Logistics, fired by Gregory 2 years ago for underperformance. What the family never knew, Gregory had tanked a distribution deal and pinned the fallout on Elijah to protect his quarterly bonus. When I found Elijah, he was doing freelance accounting out of a WeWork in Jersey City. He was bitter, brilliant. And the moment I showed him what I was building, he leaned back and whispered, "I've been waiting for someone to burn them from the inside." We brought him in under a false identity consultant only. No traceable title. Elijah didn't just help us understand Hawthorne's books. He showed us the buried liabilities, the quiet fraud, the handshake deals made with offshore accounts and cousins of cousins with fake consulting roles. He also told me one very important thing. You're not just buying companies. Camilla, you're buying votes. That changed everything, because it wasn't enough to own their pipelines. I needed to own their influence. I pivoted, started acquiring minority shares in Hawthorne's holding groups, the kind of shares no one watched: retired partners, dead-end trusts, disinterested family members. Sometimes, it took months to convince a trust manager to part with 2%. Sometimes, I had to use shell corporations to outbid Hawthorne's own buyback offers. But I kept going. By the time my father's 72nd birthday rolled around, I had something none of them suspected: controlling interest. They were throwing him a party at the Elysian Club, $400 a plate dinner, tuxedos, floor-to-ceiling arrogance. I watched from a building across the street, not out of jealousy, out of calculation. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to attack them. I wasn't going to expose them. I was going to replace them. I started drafting my entrance strategy, a formal vote to restructure the board, legal, binding, devastating. I would call for it in 3 months at the next shareholder summit. Until then, I kept quiet, smiled, let them think the world was still theirs. One afternoon, I ran into Gregory by accident, if you believe in accidents. He was at a boutique bar in Midtown, drinking something overpriced and underwhelming. He didn't recognize me at first. I had changed. Slimmer, sharper, eyes less forgiving, voice more precise. But when he did, he let out a small, disbelieving laugh. "Camilla, wow. Didn't think you'd still be around." I raised my glass, just water, and replied calmly, "I never left. I just chose better company." He smirked. "Still building those cute little startups," I leaned in, just enough for him to hear me over the music. "No, I'm building infrastructure. Yours." Then I smiled and walked away. Let him chew on that. Back at the office, I called a meeting with my legal team. I told them to prepare the filing for vote control, to draft a letter addressed to the board, a letter with one sentence, effective immediately. "I will be assuming the position of executive chair." They blinked. "You're ready." I looked down at the binder on the table filled with evidence, contracts, and the map of every silent move I'd made. I've been ready since the day they erased me. And that night, alone again in the dark of my study, I opened the folder titled Hawthorne Final Move. I didn't cry. I didn't toast. I simply whispered to the silence. "Sleep tight. You won't feel it when the ground shifts beneath you." The letter went out on a Wednesday. By Friday, I was the most whispered name in every hallway of Hawthorne Tower. Not that they said it to my face. No, they wouldn't dare. But the looks. Oh, the looks. The kind of silence that smells like fear wrapped in confusion. Exactly what I wanted. I arrived at the summit in gray. Not black, not red. Just steel gray silk, cut sharp and quiet. It wasn't a costume. It was a warning. No accessories. No smile. Just a leather binder in one hand and an ownership claim in the other. The building's glass doors hissed open, and for the first time in years, I stepped back onto the marble floor they once told me I'd never deserve. The receptionist didn't recognize me, not until I said the name, Camilla Hawthorne. Her fingers froze mid-keystroke. She blinked, stared, swallowed. "You're here for the summit," I gave her a kind nod. "Nothing more." "No, I'm here for the transfer of power." The elevator ride to the 61st floor was silent, but inside me a storm was organizing. Not rage, not revenge. Precision. Every step, timed. Every move, mapped. Every face waiting behind those boardroom doors, I knew their secrets. Their fears. Their faults. They took my voice once. Now I was going to own the room without raising it. When the elevator doors opened, I paused. One breath, then another, then walked. The boardroom sat at the end of the glass corridor like a throne room waiting to be claimed. Voices behind the door, laughter, jokes. They didn't know, not yet. I pushed the doors open, and just like that, silence. It rippled through the room like a wave. 12 men, 1 woman, all turned to stare. No one stood up. No one welcomed me. They just froze. Gregory was the first to speak. "What the hell is this?" I stepped forward, calm, even, and placed the binder at the head of the table. "Your new executive chair," I said quietly. "Effective immediately." He laughed, actually laughed, like I'd shown up with cupcakes and a resume. "You're not on this board, Camilla. You don't have voting rights." I slid the documents across the polished oak. "Actually, Vet, I control 52% of the company now." You could hear the breath leave the room. Chairs shifted, papers rustled. Someone coughed behind me. I didn't flinch. Gregory's voice cracked. "That's not possible. Check the trust holdings. Cross-reference Shell ownership in Singapore, Zurich, and Austin. You'll find my signature on every acquisition." Uncle Martin leaned in, eyes narrowing. "This is illegal. You can't—" "Yes." I cut in. "I can." I turned to face the board. "And I have—" My father hadn't spoken yet. He sat at the far end of the table. Silent. Still. watching. I met his gaze. He didn't blink. Neither did I. His face was unreadable stone carved by legacy and ego. But behind his eyes, he knew. He knew I'd done what none of them believed I could. Not even him. Especially him. Gregory stood, fists clenched. "This is a coup." "No," I replied, stepping into the center of the room. "This is the result of arrogance, of leaving value on the table, of underestimating what silence can build." I tapped the binder. "Every acquisition, every vote, every neglected subsidiary you labeled as dead weight, I turned them into gold." I looked around the table. "You didn't lose the company because I stole it. You lost it because I valued it more than you ever did." The board lawyer, Mr. Kessler, cleared his throat. "Miss Hawthorne, I'd like a recess to consult." "You'll find all your answers in that binder," I said, not even looking at him. Financials, legality, ethics. Every move was clean, every signature verified. This isn't a scandal. I turned to face the room. It's a transition. Silence again, not stunned this time, surrendered. There's a moment in every storm when even the trees know they can't resist. That was this room. My father finally spoke, soft, controlled. "Why, Camilla?" It wasn't a plea or a question. It was a man asking how he missed the shift beneath his own feet. I walked to him, and for the first time in my life, looked down at him. I asked to build something with this family. You all said no. I asked to learn. You said I wasn't ready. I asked for respect, and you smiled while cutting me out. I leaned in, voice quiet, personal. You taught me that love in this family is conditional on obedience. I'm not here for your love anymore, Father. I straightened. I'm here for your legacy, and I just took it. No one clapped, no one cried. They simply accepted the inevitable. Some left the room in silence, some signed resignation forms. Only Gregory remained standing, red-faced and trembling. "You'll destroy everything," he hissed. I tilted my head. "No, I'll rebuild it, but this time, on my terms." That night, I sat alone in the executive office, my name etched on the door. The skyline stretched before me, glittering with the lights of a city that never noticed my fall, but would absolutely notice my rise. I didn't toast. I didn't dance. I just opened the window, let the air rush in, and whispered into the stars I wasn't qualified to sit at their table, so I built my own, then bought theirs, seat by seat. I didn't throw a party, no press release, no headlines, no camera crews waiting outside the tower. Because this wasn't a coronation, it was an execution. The final move of a game they never realized I was playing. The Monday after the vote, I arrived at the office early. Earlier than the janitors, earlier than the interns. I walked the floors, every one of them, not to gloat, not to intimidate, but to see, to feel the weight of the place I now owned, the walls, the desks, the forgotten corners. These things they held stories, power, waste, potential, and now they answered to me. Gregory had cleared out his office in silence, left behind a broken watch and 3 unpaid vendor invoices. Fitting. He always left the cleanup to someone else. Uncle Martin never returned my calls. I wasn't surprised. He ruled from behind closed doors, and when doors began to open without him, he vanished like a shadow. My father. He stepped down officially 3 days after the summit. The announcement came in a 1-sentence email. I wish Camilla the best. No signature, no warmth. But I didn't need either. On the 5th day, I walked into the main conference room, sat at the head. Not to make a point, not for nostalgia, but because that's where leaders sit. The new team gathered young, sharp, diverse. None of them carried my family's name. That was the point. I didn't rebuild the board to look like me. I rebuilt it to reflect the world outside those glass windows. I stood slowly, let the silence settle. Then I spoke. Calm, measured, clean. We're not a dynasty anymore. We're a force of change. We no longer build from bloodlines. We build from merit. The name Hawthorne no longer means inheritance. It means evolution. No one applauded. I didn't want them to. I wanted their alignment. And I had it. 2 weeks later, Forbes ran a story titled The Silent Coup: How Camilla Hawthorne Became the Most Dangerous CEO in America. I didn't correct them. I wasn't dangerous, I was just deliberate. But there's one moment I haven't told you, the moment that mattered most. It happened at the archives, a basement level no one visited anymore. Full of dust, old contracts, forgotten blueprints. I went there alone. Because I needed to see it with my own eyes, the original ledger. The one my grandfather signed when he founded the company in 1953. Inside the cover, written in fading ink, built for legacy, not ego, I ran my fingers across those words. And for the first time in years, I wept, not from pain, but from clarity. They said I wasn't qualified. They said I was too soft, too naive, too emotional, too different. And maybe once. I believed them. But not anymore. Because I learned something on the long road back to this chair. Power doesn't come from titles. It comes from truth wrapped in silence, and the courage to rise without permission. The company still bears the Hawthorne name, for now, but the culture, the spine, the soul, that's mine. We offer paid maternity leave now, flexible hours, we promote from within, and every Friday afternoon I host an open Q&A where no one has to raise their hand to speak. They can just speak, because that's what I never had, and I refuse to build a kingdom out of silence. Last month, a young woman from the analytics floor asked me during one of those Q&As, "How did you know you were ready to take over?" I paused, smiled, leaned forward and replied, "The day they told me I wasn't." Legacy is funny like that. It doesn't come to the loudest or the oldest. It goes to the one who never stopped watching the door they were thrown out of, because one day they come back with the key. Now every morning, I take my coffee in the top floor office. Same view my father used to enjoy. Only this time, it's not a throne room. It's a war room, and a sanctuary, and a blueprint lab for every woman who was told she needed to wait her turn. No, you don't wait. You work. You walk away. Then one day, you own the place. Silently, completely, without a damn apology. Without a